Okay,
So
we're good
hello
to
and
go.
welcome to the Zoho Partner Vodcast. Today I have here with me Deb Di Gregorio from Camares, one of our top performing Zoho partners in the United States. Deb, it's great to have you here. Welcome, first of all.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. This is cool.
In Deb. So let's just straight get into it. Like always, a good place to start is to understand uh, what is your background? How did Camera come to be? What do you guys do in a nutshell for the viewers out there, just to get an understanding?
Okay, so very briefly, I've been in this company's existed for over 40 years. I was very young when I started it. I was 26, and I was a journalist writing about technology and fascinated by it. Did a lot of worked with tech companies throughout all of those decades. And today we are Zoho Authorized Partner, and we um, work with middle market companies to optimize them for growth and to bring them on the Zoho platform. Uh, and it's been a great journey the whole time. Being inside tech is always fascinating. It's been fascinating, interesting to ride and see all the changes in the last 4 decades. It's been extraordinary.
Lovely, lovely. And what did for you personally as well? You mentioned that you started early, right? What made you choose this career of an entrepreneur? Because it's not easy.
No, well, I always say it's great to start a business when you're young and stupid because you just don't know what's going to happen. Well, I was a journalist, and then I was at a magazine where back in the 80s where they wanted a word processor, and they bought a computer, and I thought it was really fascinating. And I ended up building an editorial inventory system on a Radio Shack TRS-80. And promptly found myself out of a job. We were, to uh, uh, assign stories and make sure we didn't pay people twice and all that kind of thing. That's what I built. I went over to Connoisseur magazine, did the same thing, and then I could have become a tech company at that time. Chose to move into writing and communicating about technology, and ended up starting Camares, which was a marketing communications company. And our early clients were all large enterprises, IBM, AT&T, all of those guys. Being in New Jersey, there were a lot of telecom companies here. We had Bell Labs. And then around Princeton, there were a lot of photonics companies. So we really started getting into working with all kinds of technologies. As a Marcom company, we started working with growth companies. And then as later, I really started working very deep in the middle market, really finding a mission in working with middle market companies.
Got you, Deb. So you mentioned you started young, right? Was there anybody, like I'm quite curious, and this is something that I'd like to know that was there any individual role model, fictional, non-fictional, that really have inspired you in your journey of being an entrepreneur? Because again, different field, different industry,
Yeah.
someone that you've held up to?
I wish that I had had more guidance. Now I see that there are these wonderful peer groups that are available for folks to join. But at the time, there really wasn't. I did, however, come from a very entrepreneurial family for whom talking about starting businesses, being in businesses, transactions, and all that kind of wheeling and dealing was happening around the kitchen table. And so it made it a very natural kind of progression for me. I found myself getting impatient being employed in one place and really enjoying working with a variety of clients and companies. And so that's kind of how it all started. I kind of eased into it. And before I knew it, I had a staff and, was working, had a company. So, and then, it wasn't easy. There were a lot of ups and downs and a lot of challenges, but you've got to persevere through and keep pitching around for solutions. And over time, I met a lot of really wonderful folks who gave me good advice, and I joined some peer groups, and that helped as well. So, I learned as I went along. Uh, you know, you have to.
Yeah, I get what you mean. But that, most of, the consulting software service providers out there, many of the partners, right? The fundamental thing you start by doing is establishing your mission, your core values, and what the vision of the business is going to be like.
Mm-hmm.
According to you, what matters the most? Does the mission matter the most? Does the vision of a company and its founder matter the most? Or is it more of the principles and the core values?
That's a great question. That's the triumvirate you always hear, right? The vision, mission, and values. I would tell you that of the three, core values are the most, spoiler alert, core values are the most important. But, if you look at the three, vision changes. I mean, if you had asked me in 1982 what my vision was for the company, it would be totally different than what it is today, right? And that's natural because people change, the environment changed. Certainly technology has changed dramatically since then. So the vision of the company changes with you. Mission is much more evergreen. And as I kind of mentioned a little bit earlier, when I, in the mid-90s, started working as a trustee at the Rothman Institute at Fairleigh Dickinson University, I was working with family-run businesses, growth businesses, and I really could see there that there was a direct through line from a healthy business, a healthy middle market business, that's a 20, 50 employees, to a healthy community. So if you had healthy business, healthy employees, it really impacted directly into communities. And so it became very clear to me that our mission should be supporting healthy middle market businesses. And that became our North Star in terms of our mission. And when you look at it, middle market businesses make up like 40% of the US economy. So they're woefully underserved. They're more dynamic. They don't have I don't want to say a complete C-suite. They have the right C-suite for their size, but it's not like they have a CIO and they may have a CFO, maybe they have a controller. It's a little bit different paradigm. And there's such a great variety. It's a very interesting place to work. So mission is important. But I think that core values, they're the things that your core values are what really is the engine of your business. And for us, it's respect and collegiality. That's so important. And our management models that for our entire staff. So it's important that we have respect for each other. We bring solutions to each other. We have a resilient mindset. And by that, I mean, we don't see failure as like the end of the world. It's a very important step to getting to a solution and to making things work. So we bring solutions to each other, and that we are really, I guess, just very respectful. We have juniors and seniors working on. We're very careful about who we hire. We look for people who are very engaged, and we'll bring that to the table. We believe that no matter who you are, junior or senior, you have a great deal of value to bring to the table. And that's the core values that we hold true. I decided a long time ago that I spend way too much time working to be in a negative environment. I want the most positive learning, innovative environment that we can manage, and a good place to be for a good part of the week.
Right, superb. Makes a lot of sense, Deb. And I was about to ask you that question as to, you mentioned respect and core values mattering the most, and how you guys ensure that there's always there with your team, whether it is a more scrutinized hiring process or more of modeling that or building a culture like that. Because it's similar to what we try to do at Zoho, is building the culture so important to us. So I would say it's a mix of both.
Yeah, it is a mix of both. I mean, let's get, the bottom line with anything in business, soft skills are really key, right? I mean, business is chaos. If there's one thing I've learned, it's just crazy, right? So you have all these professions trying to bring order to business. You've got accountants, they try to get the finances in order, and lawyers, they keep you inside the law, and developers, keep the data straight. But at the end of the day, it's people. I mean, if it wasn't for people, business would be a snap, right? But people are the challenge, and they're also the thing that makes it the most interesting. So soft skills, are really critical. And they're critical that you are working on them inside your organization, but also when you interact with clients as well. That's so important. I mean, if you read Harvard Business Review, the preponderance of articles in that publication are about, how do you build healthy teams, and how do you, work with each other, and how do you manage well. So soft skills are absolutely mission critical to any organization's success.
Makes sense. And that's quite insightful as to what you mentioned, especially touching upon the Harvard Business Review as well. Deb, in 2024, right, we're seeing a lot more of people, implementing software, adopting software. In your experience, since you've been in this field and in this game for such a long time, what do you think are the biggest challenges for software implementers and resellers and business consultants right now in today's age? What do you think is the biggest challenge?
That's a big question. Well, I think, first of all, the middle market, like I said, is very dynamic. It's a very special place. And I think that there are a couple of pieces to that question, but let's talk about interacting with clients. I think you have to meet clients where they are. There is a full range of corporate cultures out there, right? You can have very buttoned down corporate cultures, and you can have, on the other range, corporate cultures for whom the least little thing is high drama, right? And everything in between. So you need to, as a consultant and working deep inside of businesses, you really need to build trust, and you need to meet people where they are. You need a really well-equipped toolkit to do that.
What would you mean by that? When you say meeting people where they are, how would that look like if you were to give an example?
You might in your mind see the perfect implementation for them, right? But because of whatever factors inside of their organization, there might be some power things going on. There might be some other things happening. Maybe they don't have the talent in the right seats. You are going to have to modify your own expectations in order to have them achieve success. I mean, it's often more important to get them on the platform, even with an MVP, with a minimal viable product, and experiencing it, and then guide them onto it. So that would be one example of meeting them where they are. It's modulating your expectations, and listening very carefully, active listening and asking clarifying questions. We all make assumptions. I do it too. And I always kick myself to ask some more clarifying questions, because I'm always like, oh, thank God I asked that, because I was thinking something else completely differently. So asking clarifying questions, being objective. When, our value to our clients is our objectivity, right? Some people think you have to get involved, like totally integrated into a client organization. And I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we have to remember that we're a guest in their house. And I think that our value to them is our outsider point of view. So we need to come to understand them and how they operate and how they work. But they are craving that objectivity. I mean, we all are in our own little cocoons, even us consultants, right? So it's important to get a little bit of that outside, point of view. And I think also delivering options. That there are 15 different ways to do anything inside of Zoho One, right? So it's really important to say, okay, well, we could do it this way, and here are the ramifications, or we could do it that way, and here are the ramifications. And then working that in a dialogue with your client helps you, A, get closer to them and meet them where they are, understand better where they are, right? And B, get to a solution that's going to work for them. Again, not sometimes, our preconceived notion of what the perfect solution is for the client. It's our preconceived. It may not be right for them, and so we have to really get plugged into how they're operating and how they see the world.
Lovely, Deb. I think the one word that encompasses what you just explained there is empathy, right? I would say,
yeah,
that sort of describes it. That being a consultant or a salesperson, you really need to empathize these days. Otherwise, you're going to lose the customer.
You have to remember that in the middle market, it's not like big enterprises. And as I said earlier, I have worked in those large enterprises for them as in a consultant and capacity. But in the middle market, it's owners that you're working with or senior management, and everything they do is felt acutely, right? So if they make a mistake or if they make the right choice and they're growing crazy fast, it's felt acutely. It's on them. A mistake may be coming out of their wallet. They may have to remortgage their house. And so, you're really on the front lines with them. And this is why I believe so firmly that there is a mission in the middle market to support the health of these and well-being of these middle market businesses. Because, they have 20 people who are paying their mortgages, right? Or rent or whatever. So we need to be really cognizant that, they can't just, it's a very can be a very unforgiving place. And so we have to really bear that in mind as we work with our clients.
So when you talk about these middle market customers,
mm-hmm.
How do you ensure, right, when you engage with these customers, how do you ensure that you're always effectively communicating and collaborating with the clients through the entire implementation process? Do you guys follow a structure, something that's worked for you guys over the years?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I mean, we do have a structure because you can ride off the rails if you don't have one. So, implementation is the heart, right? But it's in order to make that implementation go well, you have to surround it with important activities. And the first one is always a plan and a roadmap, if you will. So we always plan with our clients. We always understand their current workflows, the workflows where they would like to be. We bring best practices to the table. Then we automate, so we get this all worked out in advance, or as worked out as we can, because you can get trapped in planning, right? If you're trying to go for the perfect plan, it may never get implemented. So we go for the key points, right? And we get the plan in place, and with a good plan, we can go very confidently into implementing that. We can implement in a really efficient fashion. And we're an agile shop, which means we're in regular communication with our clients. We're regularly showing them what we've done. And it's nothing like seeing it for yourself. They often have a great idea that they didn't think about before because they weren't fully aware. So we'll show them every step of the way what we're doing. Then we follow it up with extensive training and ongoing support. So plan, implement, train, support. It's not rocket science, but it's the fundamentals of a well-structured, directed engagement.
Got it. That seems quite precise. But Deb, how do you ensure that, even in these, segregated process that you do to engage with customers, how do you ensure that you're always maintaining the customer's trust, right? Because we went from empathy and meeting customers where they are. How do you ensure that they trust you? And do you guys have some sort of metrics or something to measure that by? Or is it more of a gut feeling?
Yeah, we could measure metrics, but I, as the owner of my firm, look at it in terms of how often are we communicating with the clients? How quickly are we responding to the clients? So we try to really guide that process. Okay. We deliver as promised, or if we can't, we get in front of them and tell them why. So open communication is absolutely critical. Have a meeting, send a wrap-up memo. What do you want the client to do? What are you to do? You're expecting yourself to do, and then do it. And by when, right? And then deliver. And so ride with the client, stay with the client and guide them through the process. Don't disappear. Don't be the carpenter that shows up, does the job half done, and then doesn't come back until maybe they want to get paid again. No, you've got to stay with the process all the way and guide your client all the way through and stay with them even after. I mean, it's really important for us to meet with our clients regularly when they're in the support mode, because as I said, middle market businesses are dynamic, things change, their requirements change. And what happens sometimes is people will put up with something not working quite right and never open a ticket, never say, hey. So those ongoing meetings are great to just see how things are going, understand where they're headed and where we can, optimize further, and also modify what we've done to be even more appropriate for them.
Got it, Deb. And in your experience, Deb, could you elaborate on a particular case where you've overcome, you guys at Camares have overcome a very interesting challenge and offered a very intriguing solution that maybe you guys are proud of and even talk about it even today over a cup of coffee, something that really would be helpful?
Well, I mean, look, every client has their own special thing, right? But that's what makes our work so interesting. We've worked with the middle market, and as I said, they're dynamic. I've also worked with venture funded companies and foreign companies coming into the US. And they're a completely different creature. They take middle market companies and like speed them up, exponentially, their process. So we worked with, we had a prospect come to us several years ago. It was a foreign company. They wanted to enter the US market. And their home office and other markets were using SAP. But they had to get into the market flexibly, quickly. They had sort of a skeleton management crew. The CFO was the first to reach out to us. He had already spun up the finances on QuickBooks. And they had kind of a very messy Zoho implementation. You see this a lot, right? It's been DIY'd. So Joe starts it, then, Jim takes it over. And then, so they all make these little changes. And in the end, you have a mess. So they were curious about Zoho. They had heard that Zoho could do a lot of things, and they were skeptical, but they were curious to see if it could. And it had some pretty sophisticated requirements. They were in the healthcare space. Of course, there's regulation. They had some rental return type things, and so they wanted to see that it worked. Now, in advance of their coming on as a client, we thought, okay, their experience management. We can do a little initial proof of concept. And it's not something I like to do before I engage them. And that may seem counterintuitive to some, but if you do a sort of a concept, it's that early in the game, it's not very informed. And so you run risks of it not really demonstrating the way they really need it to. I mean, there's a lot of risks involved in it. But we said, okay, look, let's take the chance. So we did a proof of concept. They were like what they saw, and they hired us. So, of course, the first thing, now they were rushing. They were really very entrepreneurial, very more like a venture funded company. They needed to get into the market quickly, but flexibly. So they really didn't have a workflow, right? We were kind of making one up as we planned, from their past professional experiences, and framing up something that we could implement to. And we then implemented. So we cleaned up their CRM. What else? We added Sign and Zoho Social. We integrated some outside third-party products like ZoomInfo and did their blueprints and all of that, quote templates and the like. And they got going. And they started running down the highway very fast. And they were changing their business models as they were going, because they didn't know what would work in the US market. I mean, they opened a direct to consumer, and I mean, it was, they went from B2B to D2C. We were, connecting with Shopify, and, now we're spinning up a desk implementation. And so we were running with them as fast. I mean, it's really like driving down a highway, 70 miles an hour, and, changing the tires on the car. And you're not even pulling over to the side, right? The client wants you to hang out the window with the wrench and, and change the tires as you're rolling. And that's where like a good consultant will say, I get it. Let's just take a breath and pause, pull over, let's look at the lay of the land, because you have to think about everything. You have to think about, as you're changing legacy workflows you may have implemented earlier, how is it going to impact users? Will they be able to adapt to the changes? What might happen in the future if you move this way or that way? You know, let's try to avoid implementing ourselves into a corner. So pausing for a moment can help, and then you can speed all you want. But sometimes you need to just take a breath, right? So we did that. And finally, they found the sweet spot. Now, as every good entrepreneur knows, that it doesn't happen overnight. You start, you fail. And as I said earlier, failure is just one step to success, right? So they were pitching around, trying to figure it out, and they ultimately did, and they're getting traction. What makes that different from a middle market business is they already have sort of workflows in place, and they kind of know where they want to go, right? But in this case, it was really all on the fly. So they've gotten traction now. And now you're asking me, how do I know that they like our work? We're in constant communication with them. They're expanding what they want us to do. And we're advising them on things outside of Zoho, because we have that experience of bringing businesses into the US. And so all of that's great. And, the original idea was we just start with Zoho, and then in about a year, we'll move to SAP, because that's where the home office is using. And that might still be the case. We haven't heard very much about that. That might still be the case. I see that the ultimate end of this might be in two ways. Either they continue to use Zoho and we do some kind of data syncs with the appropriate data with SAP, or they do choose to move to SAP. And if they do, they have a nice glide path to get in there, because their workflows have been set up and their go-to-business strategy is there, their business model is there. And either way, I'm fine with that. We don't own our clients, they own us. So we have to continue to satisfy them. And either way, whatever choice they make, it's a success in my view. If they choose to leave us, I've learned early on in the game that, you have this wonderful moment when you're bringing customers on board and everybody's happy, but clients need to leave as happily as they arrived. And it's up to us to make sure that happens. So whether they're transferring to a new platform or growing, whatever it is, it's that professional approach that makes you a success ultimately. So I don't know where they're going. Do I know? They appear to be very happy, because we're working more and more engaged with them, and we'll see where it goes from here.
Lovely, Deb. That's quite comprehensive. So you mentioned, this being dynamic, and you had mentioned that about that's sort of been the nature of middle market companies. So how do you, manage both, right? On one hand, you have the need to meet with the change. You need to meet with the dynamic requirements that they're throwing at you. How do you balance the need for swift implementation, but also make sure that you are giving a precise solution, not overdoing it or giving something half-baked,
Yeah, that's the ongoing challenge, and I think it really it really needs to be measured. It is what happens. It happens behind the scenes here at Camares, and when we look at how we are planning the implementation from ours, how we're automating it, what will be the easiest way, the way that takes the least amount of steps, as an example. Sometimes you can't avoid steps, especially if you're bringing best practices to a company that hasn't had them, and so best practices sometimes require some extra, infrastructure, but really taking great care to make sure it's balanced, that you're not over automating, you're not under automating, really taking a human set. And again, that goes back to what is the skill set of the people for whom you're automating. We've had situations where People were non-English speakers, and we had to work through that. Where situations where we weren't really even entirely sure that they could operate a handheld, and so again, that sometimes it takes a little bit of pre-testing, a little bit of walking the floor, and figuring out what you're working with. And again, you may as implementers, we see all the possibilities, but we may have to dial back some of our expectations, because really what you want to have happen, I would rather see success on a small scale than try to implement success on a big scale and it not work. So I'd rather see a stepped scale, a step of successes, smaller successes rather than one giant one.
Yeah, I agree, Deb. I think that's a difficult approach for most people to take it, but one that, will reward you in the long run, definitely.
Yeah.
Deb, as you guys have been Zoho partners, how has a partner program on the Zoho stack been influential in sort of upgrading or enhancing your business?
Oh, it's fascinating. I mean, for us, it was a wonderful transition. I mean, obviously, we started on the front end with the marketing suite, but realized very quickly that it's the whole enchilada, right? We, even before we became Zoho Partners, we had very, very high bar for recommending software to clients. I mean, it had to have a product had to have a large installed base. They had to have frequent updates, because then an installed base big enough to support frequent updates, because customers demand them, right? And it had to be fairly priced, which is really important. I mean, I cannot tell you how many times I would walk into clients using software that were using 10% of a package and paying an enormous amount of money. I mean, if you're on Zoho One and you're using 10%, given the price, it's not so bad. You have something to grow into, right? And so the value had to be there, the updates had to be there, and most importantly, the installed base and had to be there. And so Zoho just ticked all the boxes. The other interesting thing that I found about Zoho was that in the late 90s and the early 2000s, there was a lot of vertical market software, and they just all died because there wasn't a big enough installed base. And Zoho comes to the table very customizable. They haven't gone the route like, we are going to make the perfect software for electricians, right? What they said is, here are all the tools. You can use any of this out of the box. You can, even with not too much experience, modify some of it. But if you really want to customize the way you work, I mean, take construction alone. I cannot tell you the variety of construction businesses that are out there, and they all do their work differently. It's very hard to, yes, of course, you cross-pollinate from one, even cross industries, but it's a much more kind of a generic best practice is cross-pollination, right? When you get working with Zoho, you can really customize it to the way your business runs, which is great. Now, it doesn't mean you don't have to make compromises now and then. You do. That's part of the process. But I say to my clients, it gives 90% of my clients 90% of what they need. And, you really can't beat that in terms of a product that grows with you. And the commitment of Zoho to growth and to improvement is massive. I mean, look, I have a hard time keeping up. It's a full-time job. We have two people here who are just like all the time scanning everything that's going on at Zoho so that we're up to date on the latest, greatest stuff that's happening.
Yeah, that sounds pretty accurate. Deb, that sounds pretty accurate. Finally, Deb, just to cap off the whole thing,
sure.
What would your advice, the one piece of advice be for any software solution provider out there, any business consultant trying to sell software out there, what is like the one skill that they need to cultivate, or one piece of advice that they need to keep and hold on to as long as they function in this industry?
Well, I honestly would say one of the things that's held true through all the change in all the decades I've been in business is that the people who have strong experience in one domain, if they take the time to get experience in another domain and work comfortably in both, they're incredibly more powerful. So, for example, maybe you were a business major in undergraduate school and college, and then you go and you get your master's in IT, so that you now have comfort in both worlds and can walk back and forth between them, can speak as knowledgeably to an IT person as you can to a business person. This makes you incredibly valuable. And so if you started out as a developer, take some time to, say, learn about business or a specific kind of business or market or an industry, and get very comfortable in that space so that you can be the bridge between technology and the solutions for your client. And it's an evolution, right? It doesn't happen overnight.
Makes sense, Deb. I think that's super insightful. All in all, thank you so much, Deb. This has been a great talk. Yeah,
this has been
great
fun.
Conversation. Yeah, it was fun for me too, Deb. I think this will be super insightful for Zoho ecosystem. Any person dealing with software out there, this will be really valuable for them. So thank you, Deb.
You're most welcome. Thank you.